Start recording. Camera chooser. Stop recording. Button. Voiceover off.
All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another fun-filled edition of Here's Hank, brought to you live from the comfort of my dining room. Allow me to prop you up here against the clothespins. I would rather do this outside. There's nowhere to really prop you, unless maybe I can put you against the umbrella. But oh well, it's kind of windy out there, and my pages might turn before I want them to. Anyway, hopefully everyone's having a good summer. I'm having a fairly tolerable one, even if it is rather lengthy. Looking forward to heading back to school in September. Hopefully we're, allowed to do that. Anyway, hopefully everyone's keeping safe and healthy and happy and all that fun stuff. And where are we at here? Oh yes, chapter 6. So if memory serves from, a month and change ago, our good buddy Hank, the one that's right here, was trying to convince himself that he could in fact read a book on his own without somebody reading it for him. Turns out he fell asleep while trying to do so, and now we're going to pick up where we left off with him, and I quote, snoring like a bear. So, without further ado, at the end of my useless rambling here, chapter 6 of Here's Hank, Everybody is Somebody. If you're wondering if I finished Journey to Jupiter, you can stop wondering now. The answer is a big fat no. It's not that I didn't want to read it. I saw the letters on the page. I just couldn't sound them out. That's why when Frankie, Ashley, and I walked into the tryouts the next day, I wasn't feeling my most confident. We took our seats on the big colorful carpet in the middle of the library, the place where Mrs. King holds all of our reading assemblies. We whispered to one another, making a plan that we hoped would work. "I'll start," Ashley whispered, "because I can summarize the story really well." "I'll go next," Frankie said. "I'll tell about the main characters." "Zip, you can wrap it up." "What am I going to say?" I whispered in a panic. "You know I haven't finished the book yet." "Where are you up to?" Ashley asked. "The middle of page 1, I answered. The library door opened, and the judges walked in. There was Miss Adolph, who was always dressed all in gray. Her skirt was gray, her shoes were gray, her hair was gray, even her knees were gray. Principal Love followed her, his Velcro sneakers squeaking all the way across the library floor. Last was Mr. Rock, who smiled and waved at all of the kids as he bounced in. They sat down and called up the first person. She was Grace. I don't remember her last name. A third grader who used too many big words. She sounded like a walking dictionary. Miss Adolph was so impressed that I thought I saw her smile trying to escape from her lips. The next people to try out were 2 girls from the 3rd grade. They giggled from the moment they stood up until Principal Love asked them to step into the hall to get control of themselves. They never came back. After them was Luke Whitman, who is actually a very good reader. It's one of the few things he can do with one hand while picking his nose with the other. After Luke was Heather Payne, the tallest girl in our class, who does everything perfectly. Of course, she did a perfect job. "How are we going to follow that?" I whispered to Frankie and Ashley, sinking lower in my seat. "Do you want to get your picture on the bulletin board or not?" Frankie asked. That's all I needed to hear. I got fired up and ready to go, which was a good thing because we were next. When we stood in front of the judges, I flashed my best smile, the one filled with my zipper attitude. Miss Adolph stared at me like she had just licked a sour lemon. Ashley and Frankie each did an amazing job of describing the plot and main characters. Then it was my turn. You don't need to hear me discuss Journey to Jupiter, I began, because my teammates already covered that. Instead, I'm going to discuss how we can show Paula Hart the best time ever here at PS 87. Mr. Rock gave me an encouraging smile. First of all, we could give her some pickles from my mom's deli because everyone loves a dill pickle. We could be very polite and thank her for visiting us. We could make her laugh. For instance, I have a great joke about Jupiter. Want to hear it? No, said Mrs. Adolph. Yes, said Mr. Rock. I didn't wait for Principal Love to answer. Knock, knock, I said. Who's there? Said Mr. Rock. Jupiter, I said with a grin. Jupiter who? Jupiter. Hurry or you'll miss the bus. Mr. Rock cracked up. I could tell Principal Love liked it because the mole on his cheek did the hula. The other kids in the library laughed out loud. Only Miss Adolph didn't crack a smile. There is no laughing in the library, she growled. In fact, this team is out of the running for being too silly. Not so fast, Miss Adolph, Mr. Rock said. I know Paula Hart, and she's a very funny person. She puts humor in all of her books. I think she'd get a big kick out of Hank and his team. They're my first choice. Wow, I couldn't believe my ears. My eyes moved to Principal Love. He was going to be the deciding vote. I wish I understood what he said next. Humor is also known by the word comedy, he began. It is the opposite of drama, which is serious and does not involve laughing. Yet, it seems to me that the visit of Paula Hart is an appropriate occasion for laughter, which also helps that the digestion of vegetables. Good to know. Is he saying yes or no? I whispered to Frankie and Ashley. Whatever he's saying, he's taking a long time, Ashley whispered back. Well, I usually agree with Mrs. Adolph, Principal Love went on. In this case, I have to go with Mr. Rock. It was a yes. Three of my favorite we're going to go with lost because the letters are kind of erased here. Three of my favorite lost. We'll just go with that and wonder what it means. Beyond ES. I could already see that bulletin board in my mind. There was my picture, grinning everyone who passed by. Get ready, bulletin board. Here I come. Chapter 7. On Friday, Frankie, Ashley, and I got all dressed up in our best clothes. The ones that our parents make us wear when we go out to dinner with them. It was very uncomfortable sitting in class wearing my blue suit. It made me feel like I wanted to scratch all over it. Finally, at 11 o'clock, Miss Flowers dismissed us so we could go welcome Paula Hart. We hurried down the hall to the entrance of our school. Principal Love stood on the steps with us as we waited for Paula Hart to arrive. I was excited to meet a real author. I was nervous too, knowing that I hadn't finished her book yet. In fact, I still hadn't finished chapter 1. A yellow taxi pulled up in front of our school. Before the door opened, a woman with purple streaks in her hair poked her head out of the window. "Hi, kids," she shouted. "Is this PS 87? "Yes, it is," we shouted back. "Well then, I'm in the right place," she said, with a big laugh. The taxi door flew open, and out came Paula Hart. The first thing I noticed was her shoes. Pink, glittery army boots with purple shoelaces. She had silver rings on every finger and a long dress with giraffes all over it. You couldn't miss her earrings, which were sparkly books covered with red rhinestones. "Oh my gosh," Mrs. Hart said, walking up to Ashley. "I love your rhinestone glasses. As far as I'm concerned, a person can't sparkle enough." Ashley giggled so much she forgot what was supposed to say. Frankie stuck his hand out and jumped into the conversation. "Welcome to our school," he said to Miss Hart. "I'm Frankie Townsend, and this is Ashley Wong. And Hank Zipzer. We're the welcoming committee. We are also looking forward to hearing you speak." "My, oh my. You have a great handshake," Miss Hart said, pumping Frankie's arm so hard it made his head jiggle. "Hey, look," I said to her. "You turned my best friend into a bobblehead doll. Maybe I can put him on the shelf with my baseball player collection. I have 6 bobbleheads. I got the last one when my grandpa took me to a Mets night game. I felt Principal Love's hand land like a jet plane on my shoulder." "Hank," he said, "I'm sure Miss Hart does not want to hear the details of your toy collection." "Are you kidding me?" Miss Hart said. "I am a huge fan of bobblehead dolls. I have a really cool hula dancer standing right next to my computer and a jiggly wiener dog on my kitchen windowsill." "I have a wiener dog too," I said, "but he's real, and his name is Cheerio. I named him that because he chases his tail when he spins in a circle, and looks like a Cheerio." Miss Hart laughed so hard that I thought the 6th grade class on the 3rd floor could hear her. "I like you, Hank," she said. "You're funny." I was a funny kid too. This always got me into trouble with my teachers. "Me too," I whispered. She gave me a fist bump. "From now on, call me Paula," she said, and then she winked at me. "The second and third grade classes are waiting for us in the library," Principal Love said. "Children, let's show Miss Hart the way." He turned and led us into the school and down the main hall to the library. We passed the bulletin board with my sister's face plastered right in the middle of it. The hall was quiet, and we could hear Principal Love's Velcro sneakers squeaking across the floor. "It sounds like he's got a live mouse in his shoes," Paula whispered to us. We covered our mouths so we didn't laugh too loud. Principal Love glanced over his shoulder with a look that said, "Behave yourselves." That look even wiped the smile off Paula's face. When we reached the library, the queen of wipe that smile off your face stood up. Miss Adolph was waiting in the doorway. "I'm glad you're finally here," Miss Adolph said. "I've had a hard time keeping the children sitting still on my rug." "That's okay," Paula said. "They can squirm a little. I don't mind. I'm kind of squirmy myself," I piped up. "It's not something to brag about, Henry," Miss Adolph said. Mr. Rock came right over to Paula and gave her a hug and a smile. They looked like they were good friends, and I could see why. They were both really cool people. We went inside the library. Miss King was standing at the front with a huge smile on her face. She's a person who loves books and anything that has to do with them. Paula waved, and all the second and third graders cheered. I took a bow, and everyone laughed, including Paula. Mrs. King and Mr. Rock. "Who's introducing me?" Paula asked. "I will," I answered. I spun around and checked with Frankie and Ashley. "If it's okay with you guys, that is." "Go ahead, Hank," Ashley said. "You'll do a great job." Paula flashed me a big smile. "Take it away, Hank," she said. I stood up on my tiptoes in front of the microphone. "Today we are lucky to have a famous author with us. She writes great books and for kids, and I just found out that she's also really funny. Let's give a warm PS87 welcome to Paula Hart." Everyone clapped. Frankie and Ashley and I sat down in the front row. Paula started her speech, which wasn't really a speech. She talked to us like we were just hanging around, having a pizza together. She didn't even use notes. She read us an exciting chapter from Journey to Jupiter. Afterwards, Frankie and Ashley asked for questions. Heather Payne put up her hand. "What made you want to become a writer?" she asked. "I always knew, deep down, that I wanted to be a writer," Paula said. "I loved to daydream about exciting adventures. Other kids thought I was weird, but a very smart teacher told me to pay attention to the voice inside that made me special, no matter what other people thought." Everyone listened carefully, except Nick McKelty. He just let out another one of his rhino snorts and shouted, Zipser should know all about that. He's weird. My face turned red and I wanted to disappear. Thank goodness for Paula Hart. Maybe Hank will be a writer when he grows up, she said, smiling at me. He's certainly original enough. My face turned red again, but this time I was blushing because I was proud. Before we take more questions, Paula said, I want you to hear something very important. You all have greatness in you. You don't know what you can accomplish until you try. Now, who's got another question? Of course, Nick McKelvey's hand shot up. My question is for Hank Zipser, he said. He's a very interesting person, said Paula. I have a lot of questions for him myself. Hank, come on up here and share the stage with me. I took my place next to her. I didn't have a good feeling about this. My favorite part of Journey to Jupiter was Chapter 5, McKelvey began. I want to know what Zipser thought about that chapter when James surprised Sarah with his plan. I realized what McKelvey was up to. He knew I have trouble reading and hadn't finished the book. He was just trying to trick me and embarrass me again. But I wasn't going to let him get away with it. Actually, Nick, I have to disagree with you, I said. I think that Chapter 6 was much more exciting, especially the way it ended. Take that, Nick McKelvey, I thought to myself. I was just happy to see him start his slobbery mouth and put his beefy hand down. But I wasn't prepared for what happened next. Paula Hart broke in to a big smile. That's amazing, Hank, she said, because Chapter 6 is my favorite too. Tell me, what part did you think was most exciting? Oh no. I could feel every eyeball in the library looking at me, waiting for me to answer. The kids, Miss Adolph, Mr. Rock, Principal Love, Frankie and Ashley, and, most of all, Paula Hart. My heart fell like it was falling out of my chest down into my feet. I took a deep breath, I opened my mouth, and the only thing that came out was a gulp. Similar to that one. Chapter 8. It felt like I stood there for at least 2 weeks with a big spotlight shining right on me. In the background, I could hear Miss Adolph saying, Henry, we're waiting, and we don't have all day. Answer the question. I looked over at Frankie and Ashley in the front row, hoping they could send me brainwaves filled with the details of Chapter 6. But there was nothing they could do. My whole body had turned to ice, cold, which is what happened to me when I'm really scared. Think, Hank. Think of something. Anything. I figured I had several choices. I could bolt out of the room and run all the way to Peru and ride llamas for the rest of my life. I could admit in front of everyone that I hadn't even finished the first chapter of Journey to Jupiter. Ouch! Or I could go for it. And since I'm a go-for-it kind of guy, I went for it. I knew nothing about Chapter 6, or 7, or 8, for that matter, but I wasn't going to let that stop me. What I love about Chapter 6, I began, is that it is between Chapters 5 and 7. Everyone in the audience laughed, especially Paula Hart. "Oh, Hank," she said, "everything you say is so original." That gave me the confidence to go on. I could feel my body warming up and my tongue starting to move. I thought the most exciting part was when James and Sarah entered the cave of doom and saw that the ground looked alive, I began, and it was because thousands of space insects covered every inch of the cave floor. They had poisonous stingers, and if one of them bit you, you would grow hair out of your eyes. I looked over at Paula, and she didn't say a word, so I went on. When a whole colony of the space insects crawled up into James's leg, Sarah went into battle, swatting them off with her thick gloves. They tried to eat their way into her spacesuit until she attacked them with the laser beam that shot out of the top of her helmet. Paula got a big smile on her face, and I thought I was home free. My imagination and personality, and it was saving me again. Then I heard McKelty's voice. "What book did you read?" he hollered. "There aren't any space insects in Journey to Jupiter." "Nope, there aren't," answered Paula. "But there sure should have been." What Hank was just described was much more exciting than my Chapter 6. It was? I said. My ears couldn't believe what they... Will you two tone it down? Ears were hearing. Thank you. I go on. Before I knew it, Miss Adolph was standing next to me, wedging in between Paula and me. She was so close I could smell her grayness. "On behalf of PS87, she said, I would like to apologize for Mr. Zitzer's representation. Disrespectful behavior. Clearly, he made up this silly story. He has no business filling the room with this nonsense. With all due respect, Miss Adolph, I have to disagree with you," Paula said. "True, Hank didn't tell the story I wrote, but he told his own story. I admire his creativity. Creativity is a gift. Don't you think, Mr. Rock?" "It certainly is," Mr. Rock answered. "As a music teacher, it's what I look for most in my students. You can't make any kind of art without letting your imagination loose." Miss Adolph's gray face turned beet red, like she was a balloon about to pop. "All this talk about creativity and imagination," she grumbled. "This is school, not playtime." Then she turned and stared at me like she could see right through me. "Young man, you did not do what you were asked to. she said. You did not take your assignment seriously. Imagination is not always enough. Actually, Paula said, imagination is everything when you're a writer. I see a future writer in Hank. That boy tells an exciting story. Don't you think, kids? Everyone nodded. I really liked those space bugs, said Luke Whitman from the back of the room. And I liked that Sarah saved James, Heather Kane said. It's cool when a girl gets to save a boy. I can't wait to hear what happens next. Ryan Shamazito said. Yeah, Hank, tell us more. Katie Sperling shouted out. Hank, do you know what happened next? Paula asked me. Nope, but I can make it up, I answered. That's what writers do, she said. The world is waiting to hear your stories, Hank. Zipzer, never what? Forget that. Whoops, missed a line. All the kids in the library started to clap. Frankie and Ashley led a cheer that said, Go Hank Zipzer! Go Hank Zipzer! Mr. Rock gave me a thumbs up. The only two sour faces in the room were Miss Adolph's and Nick McKelty's. But I didn't care, even a little bit. Suddenly, my head was swimming with stories. I felt like a writer, and, trust me, that feels pretty cool. We'll pick up again sometime in the unknown future with Chapter 9. Actually, I take it back. Let's finish Chapter 9, or let's do Chapter 9. It's not even a page. Then we'll shut her down for Chapter 10, which is a nice round number, and I like round numbers. A Million Stories That Popped Into My Head by Hank Zipzer. 1. The Pickle That Ran for President and kept on running. 2. How the Raisin Lost Its Wrinkles. 3. Oscar, the Amazing Octopus. Oh, sorry, it's Oscar. Oscar, the Amazing Octopus, who juggled a couch pillow. I'd tell you even more stories, but my brain doesn't have any more room because it's thinking that it needs a tuna sandwich. No tomatoes, of course. And here's Chapter 10, where we will officially be stopping. Enjoy the next little smidgen of your summer. I'm going to try and enjoy mine, and we will hopefully see everybody in September. If not before when we do Chapter 10. Later, folks.
Voiceover on. YouTube. Back. Camera chooser. Back. Button. Back. Camera. Stop recording. Button.